Welcome, everyone. My name is Ellen Wilkinson, and I'm here today to present Clear Your Clutter. I'm really so excited to be with you today because my passion is organizing. And the interesting thing about organizing, as much as we would all like to get there, we really can't achieve that until we clear the clutter. And that's what we're going to talk about today. I've been a professional organizer really all my life, and I've been working with clients for close to 15 years, in addition to being a trainer. If you'd like to know a little more about me, there is a bio available, so I encourage you to check that out and you can learn a little bit more about me. I am the mother of twin boys, and I'm so proud of that. I always like to share that at the beginning. But again, the main thing that I would like to share with you today is that I am so passionate about being organized and about getting rid of clutter. And I know for many of us, we struggle with that. So there are probably some of you out there who love organizing and have a very easy time of it, but there are many of you that may be struggling. And so we are here today to help you. We love to start with sort of a emotional quote to kind of get us off and running. And this is one by what I like to call a modern day philosopher. So many of you may know Dr. Wayne Dyer. Sadly, he passed away in 2015, but this is a really great quote. As I unclutter my life, I free myself to answer the callings of my soul. Wow, that sounds really profound, right? Who knew that decluttering could be so emotional? But the fact is that we get our inspiration from being organized, and the path to get there is really through decluttering. So believe it or not, everything that we have in our life, all the stuff we collect, all the things around us, have what I call energy. And so if you're in your home and you're in a space and you want to love your space, you want to spend time with your family, you want to do the things with you that you love, if you have a lot of clutter around you, it's taking up energy, it's taking up space. And so what we want to do is, first of all, identify what is clutter and how does it end up in our home, and then how can we get rid of it. So let's get started by taking a look at really the overall point of this class. What are we going to cover today? What is the roadmap? So if you take an imaginary walk through your home or your apartment, tell me what you see. What do you see around you? And more importantly, how does it make you feel? Do you see piles of things? Maybe you have a lot of junk mail. Maybe you have homework stacked on the dining room table so that you can't even have a nice dinner there. Maybe your bedroom is full of clothing that you haven't worn. You know, many of us have our own unique challenges. So what I want you to do as we go through this class is to really think about your personal challenges with clutter, because we really want to make sure that we leave you with some solid tools to approach this issue so that you can get onto that path of being organized. And the other part of what we're going to do is talk about how did we get here? You know, why do we have trouble letting go of things? This is completely normal to human nature. And for any of you who grew up with parents who were growing up in the Depression era, you know that they saved every little thing. You know, my dad, who's in his 80s, bless his heart, he saved every little screw, every little piece of wood, because he would say that, wow, someday I'm going to need that. Someday that's important. And in all of our classes, we love to give you some resources, some actual action items, things that you can do, and also we will review at the end everything that we cover today. So sit back and relax. Don't go too crazy taking down notes, because you're going to be able to listen to this recording over, and we're going to be able to give you lots of information. So let's get started. The first question is, what is clutter? So you think, wow, how do you know what clutter is, right? And surprisingly, it's a little difficult to define because it can really encompass different categories of things. Some things that are important to us and that we love, and some things that are not. Let's look at the dictionary definition. Clutter is a collection of things lying about in an untidy mass. So wow, that really kind of sums it up, right? And what you think about is that our valuables, things that we really do want, can be mixed in with other things, including trash, broken items, things that are discarded. You know, you may know the saying that one man's trash is another man's treasure, and nothing can be more true when it comes to clutter. The point is, though, we have to really determine what is of value and separate that out so that we can get rid of the things in our life that are not important. So the first thing that's really important to know is to identify how clutter accumulates in your home, okay? Some of us say, you know, I really don't know how to define clutter, but boy, I know it when I see it, because I kind of get that anxious feeling like, oh my gosh, I have to get rid of this stuff. It's taking up space. Or maybe you're preparing for a move. Maybe you're going to be downsizing or relocating. And as we all know, it's very expensive to move. You pay by the pound, you pay by the box. So certainly you don't want to be spending a lot of money moving or rearranging clutter, which is one of the common problems that many people have. So today what we're going to do is we're going to identify where your clutter comes from and then what your specific clutter challenges are. And you're going to see as we go through that these can be quite unique and quite different for each person. And keep in mind as well that when we talk about clutter, while we primarily focus on the home, this also applies to your office. So if you are working in a space, perhaps even a shared space with other employees, you know that someone else's clutter can actually impact your productivity. It can impact how you feel about work. It can impact your emotional feeling of, wow, I really feel out of control or like I'm not able to find what I need to do my job. So this is a very important issue to really balance both between home and work. And luckily, the principles pretty much apply for both areas. Okay, so let's take a look and see how do you really feel about clutter? Okay, some people say, you know what? Forget about it, just leave it. I'm not going to worry about it. I don't have time. I want to go do something else. And you know, those people don't let it get to them, right? They don't have that emotional attachment. But for some of us, you know, when we look at those boxes of things that we've stored away, maybe from a previous marriage or from a previous home or from children who have moved away, we get this emotional feeling, right? It brings back memories. Sometimes that can be a good thing. When my grandmother passed away many years ago, I wanted to take one item from her home. It was her Scrabble game because I had really fond memories about playing Scrabble with her. But for some of us, we have items in our lives that make us feel not so great about ourselves, like maybe those size 2 or 4 jeans that you don't think you're ever going to fit into again. So what we want to do is identify what is it that invokes those emotions in us, the kind of clutter that we accumulate. For some people, they keep junk mail or they keep mail either on a table or in a bag or in a box because they feel like they need to go through it all, right? They're afraid I might miss that coupon. But what happens, ironically, is the complete opposite. About 25% of people forget to pay a bill on time because it gets lost in a stack of junk mail. Now, of course, today we have the advantage of doing bill pay online and making that all automatic. But if you think about it, there are still people who are paper dependent. So when it starts to impact our life, when it starts to make us get worried or anxious that we're going to forget to do something because of all of this massive paper, that's when we really have to stop, acknowledge it, and do something about it. And again, you know, here's an interesting statistic for you. 80% of the clothes in our closet we actually never wear. Think about that yourself and think about how true that is. Many people take up lots of space in their drawers, their bureaus, and their closets, and they say, oh, you know what, maybe I'll wear that next year. Or, you know, wow, a whole season went by, I never got a chance to wear those shorts, or I never got a chance to wear that sweater. If you remove those items and make space for the things that you really love, it can really help you start getting on the path to declutter. Now, what about storing items? I always like to say, this is one of my favorite sayings, storage is basically indecision. So for many of us, we'll take a pile of clothes, we'll stuff it in a box, or we'll stuff it in a bag and we'll put it away. Say, whew, great, out of sight, out of mind. It sort of temporarily makes you feel better, right? But then when it comes time to open that closet or make space for something you need, you have to revisit why you threw those things in there. So let's be really careful and conscious that whenever we store something, whenever we put something away, it has to be intentional. It has to be something that is of value to us that we need to store. We have to identify it and label it, and we're going to talk a little bit about that as we go forward. But this idea of just putting things away to get them out of sight, out of mind, it's really avoiding the issue. It's not facing the challenges of clutter. Okay. I think this is really fascinating. Did you know that there are actually 6 types of clutter? And actually, I'm going to give you one extra bonus one at the end as well. So this really helps us to not only identify what the clutter is, but perhaps where it comes from. So the first one is really one of the fundamentals of organizing. There should be a place for everything and everything in its place. So if you have items that are what I call homeless, they start to create clutter because they're in a place where they should not be. Think about it. Your children's backpacks when they go to school. How many times do you walk in the front door and trip over the backpack? Or perhaps your spouse or your partner's work bag or work case. Okay, so these things are important. Obviously, we don't want to get rid of them, but they need to have a home. They need to have a landing place. So what I would encourage you to do as you go through your day is identify where things should be logically in your home. One example I love to give is the toolbox. You know, I'm the person at home that uses the tools. I use the hammers, I use the screwdrivers, and I have a nice bright red toolbox that has a place in the basement, and everyone in my family knows where that is. And so it's okay to use a tool, it's okay to use a hammer or screwdriver, but when you're done, you have to put it back where it belongs. This takes discipline, it takes control, but it's a really good habit to get into. And gradually, as you can change the behavior, because this is what it really is about, you can start to declutter just by really assigning places for things that you really need. The second one is fascinating, trash, which appears to masquerade as clutter. And as far as I'm concerned, it's not masquerading itself at all. In fact, many times when I go to work for a client, the first hour of my visit with them is just getting rid of trash. So what is that, for example? Things that come from mail order. Now, we all love to order things online, right? Think of how wonderful, think of how our life has changed in the last 5 years, where we used to have to go out and drive around to different stores in many places. We can now go on our computer, type in what we need, and it comes to our door. But what does that result in? Boxes, those packing peanuts, those little blow up puffy containers for packing material, and all kinds of paper. And if you think about it, many of us open the box, we take out the item, and we throw it in the corner. And you would be amazed at how many people have mounds and mounds of trash in their home that can just simply be thrown away. Now, some people hold on to them because they think, well, this is a great box. I may use this some other day. But what happens is we often hold on to way more stuff than we need. Junk mail, old newspapers and magazines can really add up quickly. And what happens is they continue to come into our home, and once they're past 1 month, 2 months, or 3 months, they really become trash. If you go to the dry cleaners, you know, you have the plastic that comes around your clothes and the dry cleaning hangers. It's an interesting fact to know that the chemicals used in dry cleaning can actually cause your clothing to deteriorate over time if they're not allowed to air out. The dry cleaner gives you those really nice plastic bags just to get your clothing home clean. But once you get it home, you should take all of that wrapping off, rehang your clothing on nice firm hangers, and then recycle the wire hangers and throw away all that plastic. So these are just some examples of the kinds of things that really are basically trash that end up as clutter in our homes. You know, a lot of us have things that we stack up and say, oh boy, you know, if I can just take this to the cobbler, or just take this, I just need a piece of a special screw and I can repair this and I'm going to use that again. We have a lot of broken things in our home that really end up being trash because, let's face it, we're probably not going to invest the time or money to repair things that don't have value to us. So really be conscious of that. And if you look at it, some of this is really stuck in limbo, right? And it's, again, this inability to make a decision about something. Is this important enough for me to give it space in my home because in some future date I really need this or I really want them? Okay, and we're going to give you some examples of how you can actually decide what things you should keep and what things you should give away. Let's go to the next kind of clutter. I think this one's really interesting. Bargain clutter. So where does bargain clutter come from? It comes from this idea that when we see something on sale, or we see something that's a bargain, wow, we just have to have it, right? Maybe it's something that we might use, we're not sure, or maybe if you buy 50 of them at once, or you buy a dozen, you get a better deal. And what we're really not thinking of is the offset of buying things in bulk and buying bargains, is that we end up with more than we really need. Okay, and what this does is it kind of ties into this idea of abundance clutter, which is number 4. We have become mega consumers. So what does that mean? You know, we go to these warehouse stores where you can buy really giant size things, you can buy giant packages, and things like paper towels and toilet paper. Those are things that we need and that we use, and those may have rational uses for our family. But I can remember when my boys were growing up, they had those ice pops on sale, you know, those little ones you put in the freezer, they're little long ones, and you squeeze them and they make blue, green, and yellow ice. Well, what happens is you buy 100 of them, and after about 20, they get sick of them, and still you end up with 80. And what they're doing, they're taking up space, right? And not only that, but you're also spending money. So really be conscious of how much stuff we're purchasing and why. Okay. Oftentimes, abundance clutter, and what I mean by that is having multiples of things, comes from not knowing what we have. So how can we solve this? Now, this may sound a little intimidating to some people, but this is actually a really great idea. At some point, you need to take an inventory in your home as to what you have. Now, this particularly applies to the kitchen, and I'm going to tell you a funny story because this actually happens to me. I was recently married about a year ago, and I love my new husband. He's a really great cook, but he will go out and he will buy 4 cans of chicken stock and bring it home very proudly and say, wow, I'm going to make soup. And I'll say, honey, that's really great, but you know, we still have 4 cans of chicken stock from the last time you went. So there's this inability to really get a grip on what it is that we actually have in our homes. The other trick is to make sure you always shop with a list. So if you're going out to buy something, check with your spouse, check with your family members, check your pantry. Make sure it's not something that you already have. It's really easy to go overboard. And so what it does is it creates a lot of excess things, which then instead of becoming useful, become clutter. Okay. Food is particularly important in this category because as things expire, as they start to lose their usefulness, and you end up having to throw things away, and you end up throwing away money. Spices, things, condiments, those kinds of things in your cabinet are notorious. And one of my recommendations for people is really to go in and just pull everything out of your cabinets, everything out of your closet. Take a look, take an inventory of what you have, throw away the expired stuff, and this will help you to get on the road to really decluttering. Okay. The next one, it's called aspirational clutter. And this one also is very emotional because what we do is we have very good intentions. And I like to say that the road of good intentions is paved with clutter. So things like exercise equipment, a kind of sport, maybe tennis or skiing or rollerblading, something that you said, wow, I'm really going to do this, and you buy or collect stuff. And then what happens is you may use it for a short amount of time and then you forget about it, but you never get rid of the items. So really take a hard look at those things that at one time you said, wow, I really want to do this, and now that has passed. And be honest with yourself, it's okay. Cut yourself a break and donate those items to someone who can use them. Okay? I like to use the 12-month rule and sometimes the 6-month rule. If you buy something and you say that someday I'm going to do this, someday I'm going to reread the notes from my college classes, or someday I'm going to look through these financial papers. If you don't do it within a year, you're not going to do it. It's time to recycle. It's time to get rid of it. Remember, every item that you have represents cash. And so one of the reasons it's hard to let go of things is it represents some kind of investment that we made. But what I want you to do is turn that around and look at your current time as your current investment. Do you want to invest any of your current valuable time on re-looking at, reviewing, or worrying about things from the past? Okay. One other item that is really important is sentimental clutter. And this is so important. We're actually going to spend 2 slides on this. And this is really the hardest clutter of all, because when it comes down to it, you know, memorabilia of things that our children have done or things from our family history, we have a hard time defining as clutter because many of them have such emotional impact to us. Sometimes it's a gift that someone's given to you. And you know, I always tell a funny story. I say, you know, we get gifts, we have weddings, we have birthdays, we have Mother's Day. And sometimes you'll get a gift from someone that you don't know very well or someone that you rarely see, and you get really nervous. Oh my gosh, if I get rid of this vase that they sent me, or if I get rid of this particular item, someday they're going to show up and ask, where is that gift I sent you? Now, really, how often does that happen? It doesn't happen that often, right? So lose the gift guilt. Don't feel guilty about either regifting or donating something that has come to you that you really don't need. And one way to diffuse that is really to recommend that when you have an event or birthday, instead of getting a gift, maybe ask that people make a donation to a charity for you, or perhaps give you a gift that's service related, something that you could really use that's valuable. That's a good way to actually prevent that kind of clutter from coming in. So let's say that you have any kind of item in your life that perhaps has an emotional attachment. So perhaps something from a previous marriage. This happens oftentimes where, you may have had a previous partner and you did something together and you really have a hard time letting it go because it represents to you sort of the end of something. So sometimes it takes some emotional awareness to really realize why am I holding on to this? And for me, when I work with my clients, one of the easiest ways to address sentimental clutter is to really let people know that you do not have to throw things away. You can donate them to a worthy charity or to someone who needs it. You can recycle them. And for visual sentimental items, so perhaps it's a craft that your children made in school, you can make what we call a virtual copy. You can take a picture of it, or you can somehow save it to an electronic format so that you can reflect on it and remember it. I'm a big scrapbooker, so what I used to do is I used to take my favorite photos, which, as we all know, take up lots of space, and I made scrapbooks out of the really special ones that I could share with my children through their life. And it's been a really great way to preserve the things that have really strong sentimental attachment. So because these sentimental items are the most hard to get rid of, and because they are the most emotional, we want to give you some really firm points on how you can handle those kind of sentimental items. Okay, so for instance, with my children's artwork, the things that they have made themselves that I really find valuable, I take them and I actually frame them and use them as artwork in my home. And that way I can see them, people can see them and see their work, and they say, wait, Mom, did I do that in second grade? And I love putting up their artwork. And then when you get to the point where your children get older, so now my boys are in their 20s, and if you think about it, they went through 12 years of school plus 4 years of college. If I had saved every paper and every item, I would literally have boxes and boxes. So when they were about school age, I actually relocated right when they graduated from high school, I went through the different items and I took out one or two things from each grade that were particularly sentimental to me, that I felt were really a great indication of how they were at that point in their life. And I saved those in a memory box. And yeah, I had to throw away lots of papers. I had to throw away lots of notebooks, but you really can't keep everything. So take one item from each of a few years and keep them together. One of the things I saved were their little school ID cards. So through the years, I have their little ID cards from every grade. Those don't take up a lot of space, and it's a really cool way to see how they aged over the years. Many of you may remember back in the day when we had the school photos. Remember, you would go and get the school photographs taken, and your mom would order like the package with 10 or 12, and you'd end up with all these extras. Take one of those and perhaps put them in a little scrapbook or a little book to remind you. One caution about technology and preserving photos electronically: you can create electronic clutter as well. How many of you have got a little message from your smartphone or your computer telling you that your iCloud memory is almost full? Oh my goodness, that's so easy to do if you save lots of photos. Back in the day when we had to develop film, we didn't have the problem because you took 12 pictures and you either got a good one or not. Nowadays, we have hundreds. How often do you stop and actually go and delete some of the bad pictures or the blurry ones or the ones you don't need? So we have to be conscious of that as well. From time to time, if you have a few spare minutes, just take your phone and delete some of the old pictures, go through and do a little bit of decluttering in your electronic media as well. Sharing things through social media, and you can use, there's many different avenues now. We have Instagram, we have Facebook, we have all different kinds of sharing things. Post them to friends, and perhaps you have reconnected with some of your high school or college friends. Send pictures of your children, at Halloween, maybe 5 or 10 years later. It's a great way to embarrass them. Mine are mortified when I do that. But it's, memories are only really valuable if we share them. So instead of sticking them in a box or putting them on a shelf, find ways to share them, okay? And when it comes down to sentimental clutter and really being able to remove it from our life and making peace, it comes down to 3 ways that we can do it. And these little brown boxes here on this slide are a great illustration. We have to make a decision. We're either going to keep them, we're going to commit the space to keeping them, we're going to sell or give them away, and I'm a huge fan of donating, or we're going to throw them away. So the first part of this decision-making process is really to go through the sorting out what we're going to keep, what we're going to sell or donate, and what we're going to throw away. And this is really true of all of the different clutter in our lives. And it really does help us to break down, I like to call it divide and conquer, the things in our life that really have meaning and what don't. And the other advice I give to people, and I did this to my grandmother, oftentimes older people will have items of sentimental value and they'll say, you know what, I'm going to leave this in the will to my granddaughter, or someday I'm going to give this to my grandson. Don't will items to people in your life that you love. Give them to them now. Give them to them while you're alive, and then you can share it with them and that they can appreciate it. It's a wonderful thing to do at the holidays. Instead of buying people, more of things that they don't need, give them a sentimental item, something that has true family value. Several years ago, my mom, who always kind of gets a little nervous about the holidays, oh, I don't know what to get you, you have everything. I said, Mom, you have a picture of Grandpa Do. He was my great-great-grandfather. It's this wonderful picture of him. He's a farmer and he's holding some chicken eggs. And I said, I would love just to have a copy of that photo to keep in my home. And she had that framed and given to me, and to this day it's one of the favorite things that I have in my collection. Okay, so we know that it is very difficult to throw things away, and I was just talking recently to someone about, sometimes when you're in a family situation and you have these emotions, that can even make it more challenging. Sometimes you need an outside person to come in and help you really address these emotional issues. So professional organizers, and you can find professional organizers in many places, including through the National Association of Professional Organizers, which is called NAPO. And sometimes you just need that person who can kind of hold your hand and walk through the process with you so that you can understand why it is that you have trouble letting go of things. You can also have a friend help you. I mean, I have a really good friend and we kind of help each other through the clutter. We used to purge each other's closets, which was kind of fun. We'd take all the clothes out and we'd try stuff on and she'd say, really? You're still going to wear that? Or, oh my God, like how long have you had that? So it can be a really fun way also to kind of get that emotional support. Say, wow, why am I really holding on to these kinds of things? I like to think of organizers as like a clutter coach, right? How can someone really help me to take those steps needed to move forward? And what I would recommend is really taking some baby steps. If you really, really struggle, if you're really finding it hard, start with one drawer. Start with one closet. I had a good friend who was getting ready to move, and she actually had the advantage of a couple years to prepare, getting ready to downsize in her home. And I said, look, I'm going to give you a challenge. Take those brown grocery bags and you're going to fill 2 of them every day. You're going to take some of the papers. She was a teacher, so she had old school papers, she had old workbooks, lots of cards, 2 bags a week. And if you can do that and get that out to recycling, you're going to really start to make a dent and you're going to start to see some momentum. Okay. Sometimes it can become a problem, and when clutter becomes a problem, and we all know what hoarders are, some of us have seen those television shows about hoarding. This is actually a serious psychological condition. It's from obsessive compulsive disorder, and oftentimes you need to get professional help in the way of counseling. It's interesting with hoarders, it actually becomes a safety issue. So it's not about getting something to look feng shui and nice and pretty and neat and organized. It's about safety. Making sure that their home is not a fire hazard, making sure that items will not fall on them. And oftentimes hoarders stack things up very high. And sometimes their apartments or their homes are completely filled with items. Oftentimes it's paper, newspaper, packaging, all different kinds of items can be involved in hoarding, but we want to make sure that we create a safe environment. So if you know of anyone like that, you always want to make sure that you do get them some help. So let's take a look at a case study. This is kind of an interesting way to sort of see if this reminds you of anyone and some of the solutions that we might apply to this kind of situation. And this is actually pretty common. So here we have Daniel, who was a college student studying for physics and forced to drop out of school when his dad was diagnosed with cancer. And what happened was, after Daniel's dad died, he went back to night school and ended up getting a degree in business instead of physics, which was really his passion. He had to go back to work and support his family. So now, many years later, he's married, he's in his 40s, he has a house, he has a kid, but down in the basement, there are those old physics textbooks, and he's having trouble getting rid of them. what happens? He looks at the textbooks and he feels grief, he feels joy, he feels regret, he feels this wash of emotions, right? And it's preventing him from dealing with these textbooks. So what do you think he should do with the textbooks? Does this scenario sound familiar? Maybe it's not books, maybe it's something else in your life, maybe it's a treadmill, maybe it's baby clothes or something, sports equipment from your children's great years as a baseball player. Maybe your spouse was a baseball card collector and kept them. So what would we do about this? It's interesting with books, you know, books are tricky because once they're 25 years old, even if I was to recommend to Daniel donating them, it might be kind of hard to find someone to take them. But, you know, donation is always a great way. Passing them on to maybe a youth center where there are children interested in physics that might want to read it. And what I would stress is, let's look at the positive side of this. Here, Daniel was able to go back to school. He became very successful in business. He's supporting his family. So this story has a good ending. Holding on to the past, holding on to those items that remind us of the past are the things that really cause this letting go of things to be really challenging. What else would I recommend to Daniel? Maybe taking that space in the basement where those books are, clearing that away and create a new space for something for your children. Maybe your children love trains, or they like playing with Legos, or they like some other kind of activity. Create a little space so that your children can use that. So you can see what we're doing, right? We're redefining this space in your home, which is taking up memories, taking up something that's attaching negative emotions and turning it around to a positive. Okay. You know, I think that sometimes when I deal with clients, the only thing harder to get rid of than books is coffee mugs. These seem to be two things that kind of generate through our lives as we grow. You know, people get them and they hold on to them and they have trouble letting them go. So just keep in mind that there are certain types of clutter that you really want to pay attention to, because you're going to end up oftentimes, if not donating, throwing them away because there's not really a lot of demand for some of those kinds of things. So let's get to work and start to make a plan. Okay, so we've talked about the emotions. We kind of understand where this idea of clutter and abundance and excess comes from. How are we going to turn things around? How are we really going to start to get a grip? So the number one thing is you have to stop the tide. You have to stop this idea of more things coming into your home, coming into your life. So we had a rule in my home. For every one thing that came into the house, two things had to go out. So if you're going to purchase a new pair of sneakers, you have to donate or get rid of two. If you're going to buy a new winter coat, one has to go out. It's a really good lesson and rule to follow. It can be really challenging, but do the math in your head. Every time you bring something new into your home, you have to be able to reduce that at least by double to start to cut into the amount of clutter that you have. Okay? Shop with a list. Do not let your partner or anyone in your family go out and buy something unless it's really, really something that you need. And in this day and age, you know, everyone's much more financially conscious. So we often just don't have the ability to randomly purchase things as we go. And if you know someone in your family who does what we call retail therapy, who feels better about going out and shopping, you have to really stem the tide on those things. Okay. Declutter at least one item a day. I would particularly use this to things like junk mail and trash and boxes. You can also look at this as decluttering one drawer or one closet. You know, and maybe not a day, but at least per week. If you can attack one project a week, it's a really great way to start. Okay, start with the easy stuff first. In my experience, getting rid of the clutter trash first is the easiest. You would be amazed if in 1 hour you go through your house and get rid of the junk mail, the boxes, the wrapping, the plastic shopping bags, and you all know who you are who collect those, the plastic take-home food containers that still pile up. Those are things that are easy to get rid of, right? Because they don't have a lot of value attached to us. They're not things that we had to purchase. Get those out of the way first, and you'll feel a lot of success and accomplishment just by doing that. So what is a disposal plan? This is a really interesting idea. So what you want to do is start to set up ideas of how we're going to get rid of our things. In your community, we often have charities who will come to your home to pick up donated items. So where I live, it's Big Brother, Big Sister, it's the American Vets, it's Goodwill. You may have a local thrift shop. Make an appointment for them to come to your home and then start collecting items. And you know that the day they come to pick up, you should have things ready for them. I keep a box and a bag in my basement. And as I'm going around and I find clothes or things that I don't need, I put them in the bag and I know those are going to be ready for pickup. If you get a lot of junk mail, get a brown paper bag, put it right near the door where your mail comes in, and as soon as that junk mail comes in, plop it in the bag. Now I'm going to give you one tip that I give people all the time for catalog clutter. And catalog clutter is really difficult for many people. Once you start to buy things online, and if you give someone your mailing address, which of course we often do when things get shipped, you're going to start getting inundated with catalogs. Be careful when you order something. If there's an option there to check a box that says, you know, do not add me to your mailing list, you want to make sure you check that box. But if you forgot and if you started get inundating with catalogs, I want you to take the catalog, rip off the back cover, which has your information on it as well as your customer number and some other more important information, and toss the catalog away. You're going to recycle it. You're going to take all of those sheets that you ripped off the catalogs, you're going to put them in a pile. And on a rainy day, you're going to sit down and you're going to get on your telephone and you're going to call up those catalog companies and you're going to ask them to be taken off your mailing list. And you're also going to ask them to take you off any other mailing lists that they may have you on. Now, you may think, oh my gosh, this is going to take a lot of time. Yes, you're going to have to invest some time in doing this. And you're not going to see results for probably 6 to 8 months because many of those catalogs are pre-printed. But if you want to reduce the amount of catalog clutter you're getting in the mail, this is really the only way to do it. And then you have to maintain it. And you will see miraculously over the course of time, you will get fewer catalogs. The only other way that I have found to actually get rid of the catalog is to move, because many people, you know, by the time they're moving, and you've probably had this happen to you, you buy a new house, you move into a new house, and you still get catalogs from the previous owner. So it's one of my pet peeves because I really think that most everything that we need, we can find online. We don't need the paper catalog, okay? Don't be afraid to let go. How do we do this? You have to practice. You have to get used to that idea of throwing things away and knowing that, wow, I survived. I'm okay. I'm not going to go crazy. So it's just kind of this new attitude that you have to adopt and start to think of yourself as a person who can actually let go of things. We already talked a little about the idea of not giving material items as gifts. Give people services. Make a donation in their name. Do something for someone else that's not going to add to their clutter. For most of us, we do not need 2 of anything. Now again, if you're the kind of person who loves kitchen gadgets, you probably have a bread maker and a pasta maker and a waffle maker. You know, we want to make sure that we're not buying lots of unnecessary items that we really don't have any intention of using. In basic, if you think about it, you don't need 2 of anything. You really don't need 2 toasters. You really don't need 2 indoor grills. You can always come up with a way to also multi-purpose some of these items. So if you get a medium-sized food chopper, it really eliminates the need for a large food processor or some other kind of an appliance. So it's really important to be conscious of, you know, buying things on a whim because, oh wow, this seems really cool. I think I will try this. Another thing is to make sure that we lose the gift guilt. Not holding on to things because, you know, great grandma Rose wanted me to have this, and if I ever let it go, she would really be upset with me. We have to face those emotional attachments to things like that. It really should be a sanctuary for the things that you love and that you have meaning. At the end of this class, we're going to give you some resources, and one of them is Marie Kondo's book. And Marie Kondo's philosophy is that everything in our life, everything that we bring into our home should be something that we love, should be something that is incredibly important to us. We shouldn't allow things that have no meaning to take up space in our space, in our living area. We should leave it for our loved ones, for our friends, for being able to bring people into our home so that they can actually find a chair to sit in, a nice clear countertop where we can enjoy a cup of tea, have a nice conversation without being bombarded by things that we don't need. Now, this last one is kind of interesting. It says not to declutter things that are not yours without the owner's permission. So here's my solution to that. If you have borrowed something or someone has given you something on a temporary basis, you call them up and you say, wow, I still have your hedge trimmer that you kindly lent to me, and I believe that this is something you would like back. If you could come and pick it up by this weekend, that would be great. If not, I'm going to have to declutter it from my life. Well, it sounds a little harsh, right? It's a little bit of tough love, but you can't be storing someone else's clutter, because what happens is you become a clutter enabler. You allow people to think that they can pass stuff on to you, or you will hold things for them, or you will store things for them, okay? Don't let someone else's valuables take up your space, okay? Again, it's a very simple solution. And this also applies for people in your family who have perhaps moved out, you know, the older kids, they're graduated from college, they're out of the house. If they still have belongings at your house and you're not sure if they need them or not, invite them over. You know, come over and have lunch, and I'm just going to go through a few of these things, because if you don't want them, they're getting donated. Okay, again, it sounds like a little tough love, but this is the only way that we're going to move forward. So what do you need in order to declutter? First of all, I am really hesitant to recommend to anyone buying anything new when we're trying to declutter. Okay, it completely defeats the purpose. That being said, there are a few basic items that you will need to help make decluttering an easier task for you. So first of all, one of the things I recommend is a big box of contractor trash bags, those big black trash bags, the big sturdy ones, because you're going to use them to throw away things, you're going to use them for donations, they're great for filling up with clothing, and they're easy to transport. They're really, really incredibly important. So you have permission to buy those, and you have to get the really big ones, okay? Solid boxes. So most people don't need to buy boxes. Most people have boxes around the house to help store and to fill with items that you're going to donate. You want the boxes to be sturdy, and you want to take the time to use packing tape to wrap things up properly. Oftentimes what I see are people throw things in a box that's way too small, and the box breaks and the stuff falls over and it ends up in the corner of the garage, and it really just creates more of a mess. So when it comes to storing it and donating, boxes can be incredibly important, but you need to label them for what you have put in the box. And if you have given yourself permission to store things, you're going to write on the box what the contents is, the date that you put them in there, and this is going to help you when it comes time to move or go through the different items in your attic. You're not going to have to open up every box to see what's in there. You're going to know exactly what you put in there, you know, what the expiration date, or if it's financial documents, what the date to be shredded is, and it's really going to help you to move forward in your organizing process. Gloves can be a good idea if you're working in the basement and you have lots of broken things, or, you know, pieces of wood or that kind of thing. You know, we always want to be, you know, protect our hands. You know, ladders and things like that. Again, be really careful. You know, get help if you're dealing with really large decluttering projects. You want to make sure that you're always safe when you're moving big things. And I work often with clients who need help in this way, right? You're climbing up to reach things on a high shelf. You really need people there to help you so you remain safe. Be careful with Post-it notes. Post-it notes are great for temporary marking of items. So what we do is we recommend getting 3 different colors. We use red for throwing away, green to keep, and yellow for donate. And so what you do is you go through your home and you put Post-it notes on the things that you want to get rid of. And then you can help family members come through and help you to sort and actually get rid of them. And a Sharpie or any kind of a black permanent marker to mark on the boxes and label things, it's also a great solution. So a laundry basket or any kind of a basket is a great tool to help you organize and declutter, because when we go through the sorting process, you can put things quickly in a basket. So you put like things together. It can be temporary storage, or it can be a way to move things to the proper place. So even those inexpensive plastic little round laundry baskets, again, you don't have to spend a lot of money. It's a great way to help you kind of sort as you pull things out. You know, oftentimes when I deal with people in clothes, we use the bed, right? We take stuff out of the closet, out of the drawers, we throw it on the bed, and then we have 2 things. We have a bag for donating and a bag for trash. And then gradually the good clothing, the stuff we're going to keep, goes back into the closet. You know, so you can see, right, it sounds like it's going to get really messy before you declutter, and this is the truth. You know, if you want to get organized, you're going to have to go through a little bit of pain first. And of course, a timer is a good idea because what you want to make sure is that you're keeping track of, the amount of time and how much time you spend doing it. Normally, when I do a declutter project, I usually allow 3 hours. I find that after 3 hours, for many people, it actually becomes pretty exhausting, emotionally and physically. So you don't want this to be a bad experience. You also want to make sure that, you look forward to and you feel like you have a sense of accomplishment. So, set an appropriate amount of time and then reward yourself. Reward yourself with a nice cool drink, maybe take a walk, maybe get out of the house. This doesn't have to be a difficult or stressful process. We want to try to make this as easy as possible. So where do you begin? I get this question more often than not. Most often people call me is because they don't know where to get started. They just feel stuck. So what I would suggest is start in the room that's the most important to you. Which room is the most valuable to you as far as your time and time that you spend with your family? Because that's really where you want to start your goal of decluttering. And if it's overwhelming to think of it in terms of a whole room, focus on one drawer, focus on one closet. Okay, the idea is just to get started. Remember, the journey of 1,000 steps starts with the first step. For many people, it's the kitchen or the family room, right? Again, it's a really important part of our home. It's the one that gets the most use and oftentimes the one that needs the most attention. So you have to decide, where am I going to start? And when you do that, really commit to following that project through from beginning to end. Okay? Break it down into little pieces. Very rarely, there are some rare situations where I will actually be able to tackle one room in a day, but I am a professional and I often work with the homeowners to do it together. So it is actually possible in some cases to do one room in one day. But remember, and I tell people this all the time, if you have been collecting clutter, if your state of disorganization is the result of 20 or 30 years of living, you are not going to fix that in 2 hours. You can't undo 30 or 20 years of collecting or amassing things in a few hours. So you have to be realistic. And it's really great to set goals. Make sure that you have an idea of what you want to get done and what you want to accomplish. I'm a huge fan of checklists. If you have never read the book, The Checklist Manifesto, I encourage you to do so. Your brain shouldn't be cluttered with what your different decluttering goals are. Write it down on a sheet of paper and then check them off as you go along, okay? So we talk about donation, and the really important thing is, if you're not going to be driving to Goodwill, if you're not going to be holding a yard sale, if you're not going to be expending the time, get on the phone, go online, and make an appointment to have someone come and pick up your donated items. Okay, this I think is one of the most impactful actions you can take, because once you have given yourself that deadline that, Big Brother, Big Sister, or the American Vets are going to be in my driveway on November 7th, you have set yourself a time for when you have to start collecting some of these items and get them ready to go. Okay, it's incredibly impactful once you start working with these different agencies and seeing the good work that they do, that you will actually find yourself automatically doing it every month. And it can be incredibly powerful to start getting rid of those things, particularly around the holidays, and starting to free up the space of your home so that you can have people around to enjoy your home and your kitchen and your family room. It's really lovely. This is important, and this is one that I even myself sometimes overlook. You want to stay hydrated and make sure you take breaks when you're doing a lot of decluttering, because what's going to happen is the adrenaline starts going. You start getting really excited about doing that, and you kind of forget to even take a break and to maybe have a glass of water or maybe have a cup of coffee. So again, make sure you don't find yourself doing this from morning till midnight without any kind of a break, okay? Because we don't want you to get burned out doing this, okay? So there are a couple of different options, and I'd like to go through these and give people an idea of the amount of time commitment and energy and what the return is on some of these different ways of getting rid of your stuff. So a yard sale, a garage sale, it's really time intensive. It takes a lot of work, and it doesn't always have the return that you want. That being said, if you're really jazzed about having a yard sale and you want to do it and your family's on board, go ahead, knock yourself out. But remember, any of the items that you put out for sale, if at the end of the day they have not been sold, you cannot bring them back into your house. That is the #1 rule, because that's completely going to defeat the purpose of a yard sale. What I would encourage is if you can find, if your church or synagogue or your neighborhood community center is having a family tag sale where they sort of do all the promotion, they do all the setting up, and you just have to bring your stuff to them. Oftentimes the proceeds go to support the institution, which is wonderful. I think that's a better choice and a better use of your time. So keep your eye out for those community yard sales. Selling online has actually become a little easier. You know, if you know eBay and you've used eBay, it's a great resource to use. But again, it takes a little more time and commitment. I love Letgo. Letgo is on this list here. And this is an app on your phone where you can take a picture of different items and people in your local community can purchase them. To be safe, you can meet them at a local grocery store, or I happen to meet them at the train station down by my home if you don't want them coming to your house, and you can exchange items for cash. And again, you know, it's a very small investment of time, and it's a great way to get some money back from things that you have to let go. A lot of nonprofits, community centers love to have gently used clothing, household items. I often have packages of diapers that families have not used that are left over. They love those things. But please, please, please don't take anything dirty, ripped, torn, anything that you wouldn't wear. Don't donate those to those organizations because people don't want to get basically things that are in disrepair. You know, just throw those things away. Okay. And again, you're going to get really tough about throwing stuff away. You're going to find as you go along and do this in stages, how much easier it will be to let go of things. Okay, so what do you do if you get stuck? And again, as I mentioned, give yourself a break. Maybe you've done enough decluttering for the day. Walk away, do something different, do something that's somewhat of a diversion so that you don't really feel overwhelmed. Get support, reach out to your support network. If you have a good friend, somebody, you know, you can maybe treat them to a lunch or treat them to a movie. People are often willing to help in this area if they know that it's something that you're struggling with and that you've really been, you know, trying to get this under control. And this is a really helpful thing. And when I work with people who are moving, oftentimes we'll start in a closet and we'll go through the closet and they'll pull out, you know, a third of the stuff. And then I'll come back a week later and they'll say, you know what? Those other three things, I can get rid of those as well. So the more we go through and we start acknowledging that, wow, we're actually holding on to some stuff irrationally, you will get rid of stuff quicker. Bookcases is a good example. You know, right away we can identify stuff that we don't need, and some of the others, maybe we need a little time. But as you go through cycles, you will start to get rid of more and more and more. Okay. Sometimes we get tired of the kitchen and I'll say, you know what, we've done enough in the kitchen today. Let's stop here and let's go and move and work a little bit in the bedroom. So changing up the venue, right? Getting a little variety in the area you're working at, that can actually help you to get unstuck and get, you know, motivated as well. And I think sometimes, you know, just taking that simple coffee break or having a nice cool drink, sitting down and kind of surveying your accomplishments, looking at what you've done, maybe taking a bag down to the trash, you know, making a little trip to get rid of some stuff. It's a great way to keep on moving and to keep going. Okay, so let's take a look. Let's take a little review about what we've covered today and what we can get out of this idea of getting control of our clutter. So the first thing we need to do is be aware. We talked about 6 kinds of clutter. What is the kind of clutter you're most apt to accumulate? What is your weak spot? What is the area that you struggle with? Once you identify that, you can start to change your behavior. And the one kind of clutter I wanted to add on to here that I didn't before was collectors. If anyone in your life is a collector of anything, my mom used to collect dolls. And I can tell you, people that collect things can often accumulate lots of clutter and unwanted items. So if you fall into that variety of clutter, you might want to take a hard look at that and identify, you know, what is the motivation behind that? Not saying it's all bad, but just identify that, okay? Number 2, come up with a plan. Identify the room, the space, the area that you want to tackle first should be the one that has the most emotional value to you, okay? And sometimes it's not even a room that we start in, it might be a category. So we may say, you know what, today I'm tackling the book problem. And you may have books all over your house. And you may have a book drive coming up at your local library, or you may have a hospital that accepts books. And you say, you know what, my plan is going to be to tackle the books this weekend. So you can Generate your plan around that kind of category instead of a room, okay? What do we mean by be prepared? I think be prepared means have those tools that we talked about at the ready for when you need to start your project. So if you have high shelves, you want to make sure you have a little step ladder available. You want to make sure you do have enough boxes and trash bags at the ready. Get your markers out to mark things. Get your little sticky notes. Another thing that's really handy are those big blue tarps. You can spread them out in the basement, or if it's a beautiful sunny or summer or fall day, you can spread them out in the yard and actually bring stuff out that you're going to donate and get it out of the house and onto a tarp. Start slow, and what I mean by that is don't overwhelm yourself. Break it down into small workable pieces. Know that every little bit of decluttering that you do is going to help to go forward. It's going to help you to move forward. If you follow the rule that for every one thing you bring in, 2 things have to go out, okay? And cut yourself a break. Know that it's normal to feel overwhelmed. It's normal to feel stuck. It's normal to feel emotional. I have many times have people break down into tears because they just get very overwhelmed. But I've also had people say to me, oh my gosh, I have never felt so relieved. It's like having a weight lifted off my shoulders by being able to move forward in this project after all this time, okay? When we talk about making a plan to remove items, that's calling those those pickup services. If you have really lots of stuff, you want to call someone like a Junk Lovers or a Clutter.com, people who will actually come and take large amounts of things. Now, this does have a price attached to it, so just in the sake of openness to let you know that the donation services do not charge to pick up, but there are some companies that do, so make sure you know which is which, okay? And again, take breaks as you go along. Don't try to make this, a marathon. Don't try to do it all in one shot. You can't undo many, many years of accumulating things in a short amount of time. So as I promised, leaving you with a few resources if you can continue this trek on decluttering. So one of my favorite books is The Magic Art of Tidying Up by Marie Kondo. And for those of you who like to organize, you will be certainly familiar with that. Clear Your Clutter with Feng Shui by Karen Kingston is another book that might be of interest to you. When we talked about Mr. Dyer, Dr. Dyer at the beginning with that quote, he has a book out called Sweep It Clean Inside and Out, which talks about the emotional part of decluttering. So that could be an interesting resource for you. And of course, online, there's organizedhome.com, which has a program on how to stay clutter-free. And this is important because, once you reach your goal of decluttering, maintaining can be very important. You want to make sure that you don't slip back into those bad habits again. So we love to always end with a quote and a slide. And so don't own so much clutter that you'll be relieved to see your house catch fire by Wendell Berry. So a little bit of humor there, a little bit of clutter humor. And as I like to tell people, don't wait to stage your home so that someone else can enjoy it. Oftentimes I'm called to come into someone's house because they're getting ready to sell it, and we will work to declutter and we'll get everything arranged, and they'll say, oh my gosh, if my house had been like this, I never would have moved. So a couple of good points to remember. And one last thing, if you look at this picture, this is a really perfect closet. Everything's hung so perfectly, all the colors are in line, all the shoes are lined up. Don't get overwhelmed by trying to be perfect. For those of you who know what the Pareto principle is, the 80-20 rule, oftentimes we can get 80% of the results we want in about 20% of the time. And trying to go for that perfection, trying to get to that perfect place isn't really worth the return. So sometimes just getting to a point of releasing ourselves from the hold on the clutter is good enough. It does not have to be perfect. And again, don't spend a lot of time on organizing solutions if you're not going to be willing to change the behavior. Because you can invest all the money you want into any kind of fancy organizing systems. If you don't release the clutter, if you don't learn to let go of things, you're not going to be able to realize that goal of being organized. So I want to thank you all so much for joining us today. As I said, my name is Ellen Wilkinson. I'm incredibly passionate about decluttering and organizing, and I wish you all the best. I hope this has been helpful. I hope you're all going to go out there and pick one or two items that we've covered today and really try to implement them in your particular situation. Don't try to do everything at once. Take baby steps, and then you and your family will be on the road to getting more organized and to declutter. Thanks again for being with us today.